Homestead Arcana could be your next favorite farming simulator. Or not. I play a lot of farming sims off channel, with Story of Seasons being my favorite. The farming sim genre has a lot of well-known games now, but honestly I find the vast majority of them feeling the same or not offering a lot outside of a reskin. I'm always on the lookout for something that feels a bit more fresh than average, so when Serenity Forge and Skybound Games offered me a copy for review, I was honestly pretty excited. Currently, if you look at reviews, you'll see a wide difference of opinions swinging between "this game sucks, I'll refund it ASAP" to "wow, I love everything about this game." There's a reason for it. Full disclosure, I fall under the enamored category, and I will admit, there's always a bit of free game copy reviewer bias, but I think this gap in opinion is likely heavily due to the fact that, honestly, the game is a bit rough around the edges. Games like these are going to immediately upset some people who quickly panic about wasting their money and jump to a refund. Not even knocking it, I'm just stating it is what it is. The first bit of jank I ran into was some weird stuttering issues during the opening sequence. It's not pleasant, but at the same time, with how games update so frequently anymore, I don't really consider it to be the biggest red flag ever. It can be fixed. Once you get into the game and past the opening story, you're able to control your character, and immediately you'll run into potential red flag 2. The game feels like it's a mid-budget indie title. Everything looks rather simple, the colors are mostly really muted, and the controls, at least on a controller, feel awkward. Hard for me to fully describe, but I think if you played some 3D world indie games before, you have an idea of what I mean. While I feel critical now, and will likely feel critical later at times too, keep in mind this is a $20 game. It's not some massive AAA experience. The game starts you off with a tutorial I see Steam reviewers really complaining about, but their focus that I saw seems to be around the lack of ability to skip it, which I guess people find frustrating. I think it's a shallow take though, as people that aren't them, like myself, do want a basic tutorial at the beginning to get an understanding or base level idea of what the gameplay flow is going to look like going forward. Admittedly not a strong defense though, as I actually ended up screwing up during the tutorial, which unfortunately had a deeper effect on my next hour or so of gameplay. More on that later. Regardless though, I stick by the fact that a brief starter tutorial isn't the worst thing in the world. You start off making your living quarters, a very simple and bare bones affair where you'll select a blueprint from your inventory and slap that bad boy tent down on the ground and move on to the next task. You learn a bunch of little things to do, like find resources in the area around you, how to cook, how to use and make potions, how to tend to crops, what the mail system is all about, and the fresher mechanic, miasma exploration. After all that, it lets up a little bit, and you're left to decide how you want to keep going from that point forward. I spent a few days poking around the immediate area and gathering a bunch of resources before dipping back into the miasma and pushing the story forward. As far as the story goes, it's basic, but it works well enough. You're a witch from a major magic town who is selected to go out into the wilderness to create a homestead. This is apparently a necessary function for the town, as the population uses a wide variety of resources and potions, which causes a supply not meeting the demand. The expectation is that you'll establish yourself in the wild, grow your magical abilities, and provide essential resources to the town in need. As a side step to the main goal, you're able to keep in touch with your family and friends via a cute bird mail system, who you not only ask for advice, but also receive items from and requests from. Shortly after the tutorial, you'll also start to find objects in the area that allude to the fact that your aunt, who mysteriously disappeared, was in the area, and that leads to some cool information about how to survive better due to the experiments she was working on. I mentioned the gameplay elements before, but I think it's important to talk about a few of them more specifically in order to give you an idea of if you'd like it or not. The first one is obviously the farming. During the tutorial, you'll be asked to plant some corn, and you get an item which allows you to plant a single solitary stalk. If this happened in most farming games, I'd be shaking my fist, but as this is a magic-based farming game, it is really totally okay. After sticking the plant in the ground, you'll see a little lonesome stump of dirt, which you'll water using magic, and then you'll use what the game calls channeling magic to help it grow. Channeling magic allows the witch to pull the energy from the earth up and pump it into the seed or plant to make it nearly instantly grow, or at least grow a little bit more instantly. Gameplay-wise, you see a bunch of little glowy bumps appear, and you're supposed to swoop them up and bring them to the plant stalk, which infuses the energy to the top of the plant as it grows fast. You can repeat this action over and over, and that was actually where my issue I mentioned earlier popped up. Not using my brain, I didn't realize my quest status was to pick 1 ear of corn, and for whatever reason, I decided I was going to keep channeling over and over until I felt that the plant was fully grown. As I continued to channel the plant, I noticed the colors of the little bumps were changing. And then before I knew what was happening, I found the plant had grown a bunch of nasty purple cloudy stuff around it, and I realized the plant was now lost to the miasma for the moment. Apparently, as I should have expected, the game has a mechanic to stop players from just channeling over and over and over, getting infinite produce from one plant, which I got to learn the hard way. With a plant covered in miasma, it stops growing. After I picked the corn from it and completed the quest, my buddy cat friend Huckleberry let me know about the mechanic. Too late for me though, as that 3 corn was all I had for corn supply for the next bit of the game, which sucked, because an important potion requires corn, and yeah, also food. As frustrating as this was at the moment, I do want to say that this was actually not nearly as big of an issue as I thought, because you can find apples and onions to eat nearby in the wild, and the potion that uses the corn isn't really used all that much before you find another corn to plant. Without knowing the future ahead of me though, it was irritating. So yeah, crops can initially be planted around a big tree at camp. You only get so many of them at first, but there's a small wilderness nearby with helpful plants you can use and manage like your home plants, including metal ore plants. Yeah, that's a thing. Another note, which is seen negative, is that the way you pick the fruits from the plants is tedious. But I'd say only initially. First have to lock onto the plant, and then you have to move around the parts of the plant until you highlight the fruit, where you'll press a key to pick it up. I will not lie and say at first it was not ideal, but really after you get used to how each plant is set up, you start to do the task really quickly. I ended up not really minding it that much, but your results may vary. Last thing to note about crops is that you can let them grow naturally, and there's a way to make and use fertilizer, which helps with growth too. Standard stuff, but it helps nonetheless. Miasma exploration is another thing I see a lot of complaints or love about in the reviews. The area you're in has a giant, creepy, weird purple mist that takes over most of the real estate on your map. As expected, it's the big bad and overall mystery of the game. You'll first need to run into it and grab an item just past the edge, coughing and taking damage along the way, but later you'll craft and even upgrade a little Plague Doctor mask, which allows you to hang out in the area way longer and explore a lot deeper into the corrupted areas. The complaints I've seen stem around nothing being in the area, but I'm not in agreement with them, as I found a number of plants, resources, chests, tablets that give you story or hints, and key story items in the miasma right after getting the mask. Shortly after my first deeper trip in the miasma, I even found a little house with a number of items to pick up and some story progression in the form of a mysterious liquid. Later I used that liquid in the miasma to expand the explorable area, where I found a lot more resources, and the first enemies of the game, which you kind of have to sneak by as you don't have any offensive spells at the beginning of the game. Don't worry too much about the stealth though, as it's really simple. If you use the starter potion, you can see their view radius and just stay out of it, or if you used all the corn and ruined your plant, you can just stay far away from them and you'll be okay. I actually found the miasma stuff to be some of the funnest parts of the game as I chip away at exploring it in between farming and crafting, which allows me to change pace and learn about the world. If you like anime news, reviews, and gaming, consider subscribing to Otaku.